There's a particular kind of ache that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with tears that fall in public places or words that spill out when you're overwhelmed. Instead, it lives quietly in the center of your chest, in the space between your ribs, in that soft hollow just below your throat. You carry it with you through ordinary days, through conversations where you smile and nod, through moments when someone asks how you're doing and you hear yourself say, "I'm fine," even though those two words feel like they're covering something vast and unmapped. You've felt this, haven't you? This quiet weight that you've learned to hold so carefully that most people never notice it's there at all. And perhaps you've become so skilled at carrying it that even you sometimes forget it's there until a certain song plays, or someone says something unexpectedly kind, or you find yourself alone at the end of a long day, and suddenly the weight returns, familiar and heavy, reminding you that it never really left. If you've ever lived this way, if you've ever held your pain so privately that it felt like a secret even from yourself, you're not alone in this experience. And tonight we're going to explore this together, gently and without judgment, because there is so much to understand about the quiet art of carrying pain in silence and what it means for the person who has learned to do it so well. Now, dim those lights, get cozy, settle into your pillow and let yourself relax. Take a breath. It often begins earlier than you remember, in a moment so small that it didn't seem significant at the time. Maybe you were a child who cried and noticed how uncomfortable it made the adults around you. Maybe you expressed hurt and were told you were being too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. Or maybe you watched someone you loved fall apart with their emotions and decided somewhere deep in your developing mind that you would never let yourself become that vulnerable, that exposed, that raw. Whatever the moment was, it taught you something fundamental about pain, that it was safer to hold it inside than to let it spill out into a world that might not know how to catch it. Perhaps you remember being 5 or 6 years old, scraped knee bleeding, tears streaming down your face, and someone, maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, said something like, "You're okay, don't cry, it's not that bad." And in that moment, you learned that your assessment of your own pain was wrong, that what felt big to you was actually small, that your tears were an overreaction. So you learned to measure your pain against other people's judgments of it, and you learned to find your own feelings excessive, unnecessary, embarrassing. Or maybe it happened differently. Maybe you came home from school upset about something a friend said, something that cut deep into that tender place where your sense of self was still forming, and the adult you trusted most looked at you with exhaustion in their eyes and said, "I can't deal with this right now," and you understood, even at that young age, that your pain was a burden, an inconvenience, something that took up too much space in an already crowded world. There's also the possibility that no one said anything directly. Maybe you simply observed. You watched your mother swallow her own sadness day after day, her face carefully neutral, even when you could sense something breaking inside her. You watched your father's jaw tighten when he was angry, the way he would leave the room rather than express what he felt. You watched the adults around you navigate their emotions through suppression, through silence, through the careful art of not letting anything show. And children are remarkable observers. They learn not from what they're told, but from what they witness. So you learned that pain is something you carry quietly, that emotions are private things, that the strongest people are the ones who never let their struggles show. These lessons embedded themselves so deeply that they became part of your operating system, running in the background of your consciousness, shaping every emotional response without you even realizing it. And so, over time, carrying pain in silence becomes more than just a behavior. It becomes a structure, a careful architecture built within your emotional landscape. You develop systems for managing feelings before they become visible. You create internal compartments where certain emotions can be stored, sorted, organized in ways that keep them from surfacing unexpectedly. Your mind becomes incredibly skilled at this sorting process, at deciding what can be expressed and what must be contained. And the fascinating thing is, this architecture doesn't feel constructed. It feels natural, automatic, like breathing. You don't think about doing it anymore. It simply happens. This internal structure is actually quite sophisticated when you examine it closely. There are certain feelings you allow yourself to express, the safe ones. Perhaps you can show excitement, enthusiasm, gentle contentment. These emotions don't threaten anyone, don't demand too much, don't create discomfort in social spaces. But then there are the other emotions, the ones that get carefully filed away. Grief goes into one compartment, anger into another, fear, loneliness, despair. Each has its designated place in the architecture of your inner world. And you've become so efficient at this filing system that it happens instantaneously. The moment an uncomfortable emotion arises, before it can even fully form, your mind has already categorized it, contained it, stored it away somewhere safe where it won't leak out into your visible life. What's remarkable about this process is how quickly it becomes unconscious. You're not actively thinking, I need to hide this feeling right now. Instead, the suppression happens so smoothly, so automatically, that you might not even register that you had the feeling in the first place. It's like your mind has developed a filter that processes emotions before they reach your conscious awareness, allowing only certain feelings through while diverting the rest into storage. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional bypassing, the automatic routing of feelings away from conscious experience. And while this system serves a protective function, while it helps you navigate a world that often feels unsafe for raw emotional expression, it also creates a distance between you and your own inner life. You become so good at managing your emotions that you sometimes lose touch with what you're actually feeling. The architecture also includes strategies, specific techniques you've developed for keeping emotions contained when they threaten to surface. Maybe you've learned to redirect your focus the moment tears start to form. Maybe you've developed the ability to numb yourself, to create a kind of emotional anesthesia that allows you to move through difficult moments without feeling their full impact. Maybe you've perfected the art of intellectual analysis, turning feelings into thoughts, transforming emotional experiences into abstract concepts you can examine from a safe distance. These strategies work remarkably well, which is why they persist. They allow you to function, to show up, to appear stable even when your inner world is turbulent. But here's something most people don't realize. The body keeps score even when you're not consciously aware of it. While your mind carefully files away each hurt, each disappointment, each moment of unexpressed grief, your body absorbs the impact. Research in somatic psychology shows that emotional suppression doesn't make feelings disappear. It redirects them. That tension in your shoulders that never quite releases. That knot in your stomach that tightens during stress. That persistent headache that has no clear medical cause. These are often the body's way of speaking the pain that your voice has learned to silence. The pioneering work of researchers like Bessel van der Kolk has shown us that trauma and unexpressed emotion literally live in the body. When you suppress a feeling, your nervous system still registers it. Your body still responds with the physiological changes that accompany that emotion. Your heart rate might increase, your breath might become shallow, stress hormones might flood your system. But because you've trained yourself not to acknowledge or express the emotion, all of that physiological activation has nowhere to go. It gets trapped in your tissues, in your muscles, in the very cells of your body. Over time, this creates what some therapists call body armor, chronic patterns of muscular tension that serve as physical manifestations of emotional holding. You might notice this in subtle ways. Perhaps your jaw is always tight, clenched even in sleep, grinding your teeth through the night as your body tries to process what your mind won't let you feel. Perhaps your neck and shoulders carry a constant ache, as if you're holding up an invisible weight, which, in a sense, you are. Perhaps your breathing is habitually shallow, your chest never quite expanding fully, as if opening your lungs completely might allow too much feeling to flood in. Perhaps your digestion is unpredictable, your stomach churning and unsettled, responding to the emotions that churn within you unexpressed. These physical symptoms are not separate from your emotional life. They are your emotional life, speaking in the only language available to it when words and tears are not permitted. There's also something called the relaxation response, a phenomenon where people who've been holding tension for a long time actually feel worse when they finally try to relax. Maybe you've experienced this. You decide to take a bath, to meditate, to rest, and suddenly you feel anxious, agitated, overwhelmed. This happens because when your body begins to release its protective tension, the emotions that were being held in that tension start to surface. Your body, in its wisdom, was using that tension to keep certain feelings at bay, and now that the tension is releasing, the feelings are emerging. This is why genuine relaxation can feel so threatening to people who carry pain silently. It's not that they don't want to relax, it's that relaxation means feeling, and feeling means encountering all the pain they've been so carefully avoiding. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. You've probably become exceptionally good at looking normal. Not just okay, but genuinely fine. You've mastered the art of the reassuring smile, the steady voice, the calm demeanour that puts others at ease. People look at you and see someone who has it together, someone who manages life with grace and composure. They don't see the careful performance this requires. They don't see the energy it takes to maintain this appearance. They don't see you late at night when the mask comes off and you finally let yourself feel the weight of everything you've been holding. And sometimes you wonder if anyone would believe you if you told them the truth. This mask of normalcy is something you've crafted carefully over years. Every element of it has been refined through practice. You know exactly how to modulate your voice so it sounds calm, even when anxiety is coursing through you. You know how to arrange your face into pleasant, approachable expressions that give nothing away. You know how to participate in conversations with just the right amount of energy, not too much enthusiasm, which might seem manic, not too little, which might invite concern, but just enough to seem engaged and present. You've studied the social cues that signal wellness, and you've learned to perform them flawlessly. What makes this particularly exhausting is that the performance isn't just external, you're also performing for yourself. You've become so committed to the narrative that you're fine that you sometimes convince even yourself. You move through days telling yourself that everything's manageable, that you're handling it all, that there's nothing to be concerned about, and then suddenly in a quiet moment, maybe driving home from work or lying in bed at night, the truth crashes through. You're not fine. You haven't been fine for a long time. But the awareness is fleeting because the mask is so well practiced that it slips back into place almost immediately, protecting you from the full weight of your own reality. There are reasons, deep psychological reasons, why silence feels like the safer choice. Perhaps every time you tried to share your pain in the past, it was minimized, dismissed, or turned back on you somehow. Perhaps you learned that your pain made others uncomfortable, and you began to prioritize their comfort over your own need to be heard. Or perhaps you internalized the belief that strong people don't complain, that capable people handle things on their own, that admirable people don't burden others with their struggles. These beliefs become so deeply embedded that they operate automatically beneath conscious thought, making silence feel not just preferable, but necessary. Think about the times you did try to reach out, the moments when the pain felt so overwhelming that you broke your own rule and attempted to share it with someone. Maybe you told a friend you were struggling, and they responded with well-meaning but ultimately dismissive reassurances. "It's not that bad," they might have said. "Things could be worse. Just think positive." And while they meant to help, what you heard was that your pain wasn't valid, that you were making too much of things, that you should be able to handle this better. Or maybe you opened up to someone and they immediately tried to fix you, offering solutions and advice when all you needed was to be heard. Their discomfort with your pain was palpable, and you learned that sharing your struggle makes other people uncomfortable, and if you care about them, you won't do that to them again. There's also a particular kind of response that's especially damaging, the one where your pain gets turned into a story about someone else. You share something difficult you're going through, and the other person immediately responds with their own story, their own worse experience, effectively making your pain about them. Or worse, they respond with judgment, suggesting that your pain is somehow your fault, that if you had made different choices or been stronger or tried harder, you wouldn't be in this situation. These responses teach you that vulnerability is dangerous, that revealing your struggles opens you up to criticism, comparison, and blame, and so silence becomes not just a preference but a protective strategy, a way of keeping yourself safe from the ways people can hurt you when you're already hurting. The beliefs about strength and capability run even deeper. Somewhere along the way, you absorbed the message that strong people don't need help, that self-sufficiency is a virtue, that dependency is weakness. Perhaps this came from cultural messages about rugged individualism, about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, about not being a victim. Perhaps it came from family dynamics where asking for help was seen as failure, where the highest praise was reserved for those who managed everything alone. These beliefs become part of your identity. You see yourself as someone who is strong, capable, independent. And if you're those things, then needing support feels like a betrayal of who you are. Silence becomes a way of maintaining your sense of self, of proving to yourself and others that you really are as strong as you need to be. One of the most painful paradoxes is that you can feel most alone when you're surrounded by people who care about you. You can be in a room full of friends, family, colleagues, people who genuinely want to know you, and still feel completely isolated in your experience. Because when you carry pain in silence, you create an invisible barrier between your inner world and the world others see. They know the version of you that functions, that performs, that appears whole. but they don't know the version that struggles, that aches, that sometimes barely holds together. And that gap between who you are and who they think you are can feel like the loneliest space in the world. This loneliness is particularly cruel because it exists within connection rather than in the absence of it. You're not physically alone. You have relationships, people who would say they know you, people who might even say they love you, but they know only the parts you've allowed them to see. They know the competent you, the reliable you, the person who shows up and does what needs to be done. They don't know about the nights when you cry in your car before going inside because you need to fall apart somewhere but can't let it happen where anyone might see. They don't know about the mornings when it takes everything you have just to get out of bed, when the simple act of facing another day feels impossibly heavy. They don't know about the constant internal dialogue, the ways you talk yourself through moments that look easy from the outside but feel overwhelming from within. And here's what makes this especially painful. You want them to know. Part of you desperately wants someone to see through the facade, to notice that you're struggling, to care enough to push past your automatic "I'm fine" responses and insist on the truth. But another part of you works tirelessly to make sure that never happens. You've become so skilled at hiding that even your desire to be seen is hidden. You send out signals that are so subtle, so easily missed, that no one picks up on them. A slight change in your energy, a moment of quietness that lasts a beat too long, a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. These are breadcrumbs that you drop unconsciously, hoping someone will follow the trail, but you've also made sure the breadcrumbs are nearly invisible, because the thought of someone actually finding what you're hiding feels terrifying. There's also the strange experience of feeling most lonely in moments that should feel connecting. Maybe you're at a gathering and everyone is sharing their struggles, their vulnerabilities, creating what feels like intimate connection. And you participate, you nod, you offer support, but you don't share your own pain. You maintain your role as the listener, the helper, the strong one, and as everyone around you opens up, you feel the distance between you and them growing wider. They're revealing themselves, and you're concealing yourself. And with each moment of their honesty, you feel more isolated in your silence. It's as if you're watching connection happen from behind glass, seeing it, understanding it, but unable to reach through and touch it yourself. This paradox creates a profound ache. You're surrounded by people, embedded in relationships, participating in community, yet you carry your deepest experiences entirely alone. And sometimes you wonder if anyone would even recognize you if you showed them who you really are beneath the performance. You wonder if the person they think they know and the person you actually are have become so different that bridging that gap would be impossible. You wonder if you've been alone for so long in your silence that you wouldn't even know how to let someone in anymore. And so, pain that isn't expressed doesn't simply disappear, it accumulates. Each small hurt that goes unspoken adds to the collection. Each disappointment that you swallow instead of sharing joins the others. Each moment of grief that you move through alone becomes part of a growing weight that you carry everywhere you go. And what's remarkable is how much weight a person can learn to carry, how much they can hold while still getting up each morning, going to work, showing up for others, appearing functional. The human capacity for silent endurance is both extraordinary and heartbreaking. Think about it this way. Every time something hurts and you don't express it, that hurt doesn't evaporate. It gets stored somewhere in your system. Maybe it goes into your body, adding to the tension you already carry. Maybe it goes into your emotional reserves, taking up space that was meant for joy, for lightness, for spontaneity. Maybe it goes into your memory, becoming part of a long catalogue of moments when you were hurt and no one knew. And over time, these accumulated experiences create a kind of internal heaviness, a weight that you carry constantly but that no one else can see. The accumulation happens gradually, so gradually that you might not notice it at first. One disappointment you don't share, one moment of sadness you process alone, one rejection you absorb in silence. Each one seems manageable on its own. Each one seems like something you can handle, and you tell yourself it's not that big of a deal, that you're being strong, that you don't need to make a big thing out of it. But months pass, years pass, and those individual moments have piled up into something substantial. You're carrying the weight of 100 unexpressed hurts, 1,000 swallowed disappointments, countless moments of private grief. And the weight of all of that together is enormous, even if each piece felt small at the time. What's particularly insidious about this accumulation is that it's invisible. If you were carrying physical weight, if you were literally holding heavy objects, people would notice. They would see you struggling under the burden. They would offer to help. But emotional weight doesn't show in the same way. You can be carrying an unbearable amount of accumulated pain and still look completely normal. You can still smile, still function, still show up for others. And because the weight is invisible, because no one can see how much you're carrying, you often end up carrying even more. People continue to lean on you, to ask things of you, to expect your usual strength and reliability, not knowing that you're already holding more than you can bear. The human capacity for this kind of silent endurance is both remarkable and tragic. Remarkable because it demonstrates the incredible strength of the human spirit, the ability to continue moving forward even under immense internal pressure. Tragic because no one should have to carry this much alone, because the strength required to do so comes at such a high cost. And the cost isn't always obvious. It shows up in subtle ways. In the increasing difficulty you have feeling joy, in the way positive experiences feel muted, as if you're experiencing them through a filter, in the chronic fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to cure, in the sense that you're going through the motions of life rather than truly living it. Beneath the silence, there's often a deep fear, the fear that if you spoke your pain aloud, if you let people see the full extent of what you carry, you would become too much, too heavy, too complicated, too difficult to love. This fear is rarely rational, but it's incredibly powerful. It whispers that people will leave if they see the real extent of your struggle, that relationships will break under the weight of your truth, that you will exhaust the people you care about if you're honest about what you need, and so you protect them from yourself, from your pain, by keeping it contained. This fear of being too much is one of the most pervasive and damaging beliefs that people who carry pain in silence tend to hold. It's rooted in experiences, often early experiences, where your needs or emotions were treated as burdensome. Maybe you were explicitly told you were too much. Maybe you saw the way people's faces change when you expressed distress, the way they pulled back, the way they seemed overwhelmed or irritated. Maybe you internalize messages from a culture that values independence and emotional restraint, that treats needing support as a kind of failure. Whatever the origin, you came to believe that your pain, your needs, your struggles are inherently too much for other people to handle. And this belief, operates with remarkable consistency. Every time you consider reaching out, every time you think about sharing what you're going through, this fear rises up. It tells you that doing so will push people away. It reminds you of times when you were vulnerable and it didn't go well. It predicts catastrophic outcomes, relationships ending, people becoming frustrated with you, the support network you do have crumbling under the weight of your truth. And even though these predictions are rarely accurate, even though most people are capable of holding much more than you give them credit for, the fear is powerful enough to keep you silent. There's also a protective instinct here, a genuine care for the people in your life. You don't want to burden them. You don't want to add to their stress. You know they have their own struggles, their own challenges, and you don't want to make their lives harder. This comes from a place of love, of consideration, of not wanting to be selfish. But it also comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how relationships work. Real connection isn't about only sharing the easy parts. It's not about protecting people from your humanity. True intimacy requires vulnerability, requires letting people see you in your struggles, not just in your strength. But when you're operating from this fear of being too much, you can't access that understanding. Instead, you see your pain as something that needs to be managed, controlled, kept away from the people you care about. What's heartbreaking about this fear is that it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, though not in the way you expect. When you consistently hide your struggles, when you never let people support you, when you always appear fine, you create relationships that are imbalanced. People get used to you being the strong one, the one who doesn't need anything, and over time these relationships can start to feel shallow, unsatisfying, lonely. Not because people don't care, but because you haven't given them the opportunity to care for you in return. And when you finally do reach a breaking point, when the accumulated weight becomes too much and something has to give, people are often shocked. They had no idea you were struggling because you never showed them. And that shock can create distance, not because they're judging you for having struggles, but because they're hurt that you didn't trust them enough to share. There's an exhausting kind of performance that happens when you carry pain in silence. Every social interaction becomes a careful act of emotional management. You monitor your expressions, your tone, your energy level. You make sure you're not too quiet, not too withdrawn, not showing any signs that might invite questions you don't want to answer. You've learned exactly how to laugh at the right moments, how to participate in conversations without revealing too much, how to redirect attention away from yourself before anyone looks too closely. This performance becomes so automatic that sometimes you forget you're performing at all. But make no mistake, it is a performance, and it requires tremendous energy. Before you walk into any social situation, there's often a mental preparation that happens. You assess how you're feeling, you decide what version of yourself you need to present, you gather the energy required to maintain that presentation. If you're feeling particularly low, this preparation is even more intensive. You have to work harder to appear normal, to match the energy of the room, to participate in a way that won't raise concerns, and throughout the interaction, you're constantly monitoring yourself. Is your smile convincing enough? Are you talking too little? Are you engaging appropriately? Is anyone looking at you with that particular kind of concern that suggests they're seeing through your facade? This constant self-monitoring is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's like having a part of your consciousness split off to observe and evaluate your performance while another part tries to actually engage in the moment. You're never fully present because you're always partly focused on managing how you appear, and this split attention takes a toll. After social interactions, even pleasant ones, you often feel drained, not just tired, but depleted, because you've been working so hard to maintain the performance, to keep the pain hidden, to appear fine when you're not. The performance also becomes more elaborate over time. You don't just manage your expressions and tone, you learn to anticipate questions and prepare answers. When someone asks how you are, you have a repertoire of responses that sound genuine but reveal nothing. I'm good, just busy. Can't complain. Hanging in there. Each response is calibrated to satisfy the social requirement of the question without inviting deeper inquiry. You've also learned the art of deflection, of turning conversations away from yourself. Someone asks about you, and within seconds you've redirected the conversation to them, asking about their life, their work, their family. And most people are happy to talk about themselves, so they don't notice that you've skillfully avoided sharing anything real about your own experience. Often, the pattern of carrying pain in silence begins in childhood, in families where certain emotions weren't welcome or safe to express. Maybe you grew up in a household where anger was dangerous, or sadness was weakness, or fear was unacceptable. Maybe your parents were dealing with their own overwhelming struggles and couldn't hold space for yours. Or maybe you were the child who naturally became the caregiver, the one who learned early that your job was to make things easier, not harder. These childhood dynamics create deep neural pathways that shape how you relate to your own pain for decades to come. The family system you grew up in taught you fundamental lessons about emotional expression, about needs, about vulnerability. If you grew up in a home where anger led to violence or terrifying emotional outbursts, you learned that anger is dangerous, that it's safer to suppress it than to risk what might happen if you let it out. If you grew up in a home where sadness was dismissed or mocked, where crying was seen as weakness or manipulation, you learned to hide your tears, to process your grief in private, to appear strong even when you were breaking inside. If you grew up in a home where fear was unacceptable, where you were expected to be brave, tough, resilient, you learned to hide your vulnerability, to face things alone rather than admit you were scared. Sometimes the lessons were even more subtle. Maybe your parents were good people who loved you, but they were overwhelmed by their own struggles. Maybe they were dealing with financial stress, relationship problems, mental health challenges, addiction, and you, as a sensitive, perceptive child, learned that adding your needs to their already full plate would be too much, so you learned to be easy, to not make waves, to handle your own problems. You became the child who didn't complain, who didn't ask for much, who seemed fine even when you weren't. And your parents, grateful for one less thing to worry about, reinforced this pattern by praising you for being so independent, so mature, so strong. Or maybe you were the child who became the parentified child, the one who took care of younger siblings or even took care of your own parents emotionally. Maybe you learned to read your mother's moods and adjust your behavior to keep her stable. Maybe you learned to manage your father's emotions, to be cheerful when he was depressed, to be calm when he was anxious. In these dynamics, your emotional needs became secondary. Your job was to regulate others, not to have your own needs met. And this created a template that you've carried forward into adult relationships, where you continue to prioritize others' emotional well-being while neglecting your own. These childhood patterns create what neuroscientists call neural pathways, habitual patterns of thinking and feeling that become deeply embedded in your brain structure. When you repeatedly suppress emotions in childhood, your brain learns that this is the appropriate response to distress. The neural pathway for feel something difficult, immediately suppress it, gets reinforced over and over until it becomes automatic. By the time you're an adult, you're not consciously choosing to hide your pain. Your brain is automatically routing your emotions through the same pathways that were established decades ago. Pathways that lead to silence, to concealment, to handling everything alone. Many people who carry pain in silence are also perfectionists. There's a connection here that runs deep. Perfectionism often stems from the belief that you need to be flawless, to be loved, accepted, valued. And if you believe you need to be perfect, then pain, struggle, and difficulty become evidence of imperfection. They become things that need to be hidden, managed, controlled. So you present only the polished version of yourself, the version that has everything handled, while the messy, hurting, human parts of you remain carefully concealed. But this creates an impossible standard, one that no human being can actually maintain, no matter how hard they try. The relationship between perfectionism and silent suffering makes sense when you examine it closely. Perfectionism is fundamentally about control, about managing how you're perceived, about ensuring that you meet certain standards so that you can feel safe, valued, worthy. And pain, by its very nature, is uncontrollable. It's messy. It's unpredictable. It doesn't fit neatly into the polished image you're trying to maintain. So when pain arises, when struggle emerges, when difficulty appears, it threatens the entire structure of perfectionism you've built. It becomes evidence that you're not as together as you need to be, that you're failing at the impossible task of being flawless. This creates a particularly cruel dynamic. The very things that make you human, vulnerability, struggle, emotional complexity, become things you feel you need to hide. You end up in a constant state of attempting to control the uncontrollable, to perfect the imperfectible, to manage aspects of human experience that by their nature cannot be managed. And this takes an enormous amount of energy. You're not just dealing with the pain itself, you're also dealing with the shame of having pain, the fear that the pain reveals your inadequacy, the exhausting work of hiding evidence of your struggles. Perfectionism also creates a particularly painful form of isolation. Because if you believe you need to be perfect to be lovable, then you can never truly let anyone see you as you are. You can never relax into authentic connection, because you're always monitoring, always managing, always making sure that what people see is the acceptable version of you. And this means that even in your closest relationships, even with people who genuinely care about you, there's a part of you that remains hidden, protected, kept at a safe distance from scrutiny. You might be physically close to people, but emotionally you're alone, separated by the gap between who you are and who you think you need to be. What makes this especially difficult is that perfectionism is often praised, at least initially. When you're the one who always has it together, who never complains, who handles everything with apparent ease, people admire you. They see you as strong, capable, impressive, and this positive feedback reinforces the behavior. It tells you that the version of yourself you're presenting is the valuable one, the one worthy of respect and admiration. And by extension, it suggests that the version of yourself that struggles, that needs help, that feels overwhelmed, is the version that should stay hidden. So you work even harder to maintain the perfect facade, not realizing that you're slowly suffocating under the weight of your own impossibly high standards. The truth that perfectionism hides from you is this: you're already worthy, exactly as you are, with all your imperfections, all your struggles, all your very human messiness. You don't need to earn love through flawlessness. You don't need to prove your value through constant achievement and composed appearances. But when you're deep in perfectionism, when you've built your entire sense of self around being perfect, this truth feels impossible to believe. It feels like a kind lie people tell to make you feel better, rather than a fundamental reality about human worth. And so, there are moments, sometimes when you least expect them, when the carefully constructed walls almost crumble. Someone shows you unexpected kindness. Someone asks how you're really doing with genuine concern in their voice. Someone touches your shoulder gently, and suddenly you feel everything at once. The pain you've been carrying threatens to spill out, and you feel yourself teetering on the edge of breaking open. And in that moment, you have to make a choice. Do you let it out, or do you pull yourself back together? And often, you choose to pull back, to swallow it down, to say "I'm okay" one more time, even as everything inside you is screaming to be heard. These moments are fascinating because they reveal something important. The pain is always there, just beneath the surface, held back by the thinnest of barriers. And sometimes something small, something unexpected weakens that barrier just enough that you can feel the pressure building, the tears threatening, the truth wanting to emerge. Maybe someone looks at you with such genuine care that it catches you off guard. Maybe someone says something kind in a moment when you're feeling particularly fragile. Maybe you're already worn down from carrying everything alone, and one more small gesture of tenderness is almost too much to bear. In these moments, you often feel a physical sensation, a tightening in your throat, a pressure behind your eyes, a trembling in your chest. Your body is preparing to release, to express, to let out what's been held in. And there's a split second where you could go either way. You could let yourself cry, could tell the truth, could say, "Actually, I'm not okay at all." Or you could push it back down, could force a smile, could say something deflecting that moves the conversation away from the dangerous territory of your actual feelings. And here's what's heartbreaking. More often than not, you choose to push it back down, even when part of you desperately wants to break open, even when you're exhausted from holding everything together, even when someone is offering you a safe space to be vulnerable. You pull back. You swallow the tears. You steady your voice. You say something like, "I'm fine, really, just tired," or "It's nothing. I'm okay." And the moment passes, the person accepts your reassurance, the conversation moves on, and you're left alone again with everything you didn't say. Why do you do this? Why, even in moments when release feels so close, do you choose to maintain the silence? Sometimes it's habit, the pattern so deeply ingrained that it operates automatically before you even have time to consciously choose. Sometimes it's fear, the fear that if you start crying you won't be able to stop, that if you admit how much you're struggling it will become too real, too overwhelming. Sometimes it's protection, not wanting to burden the other person, not wanting to make them uncomfortable, not wanting to shift from your familiar role of being the strong one to the unfamiliar vulnerability of being the one who needs support. And sometimes it's a deeper fear, the fear that if you show your pain and the response isn't what you need, if you're met with dismissal or awkwardness or well-meaning but unhelpful advice, it will hurt worse than continuing to carry everything alone. So you've developed this pattern, this internal dialogue that helps you maintain the silence, helps you stay self-sufficient, helps you avoid the vulnerability of needing anyone. People who carry pain in silence often have a very specific internal dialogue. It's a voice that says, "You can handle this yourself. You don't need anyone. You're strong enough to figure this out alone." This voice can sound like strength, like resilience, like healthy independence, but sometimes it's actually a defense mechanism, a way of protecting yourself from the vulnerability of asking for help, of admitting you're struggling, of letting someone see you in your weakest moments. And while self-sufficiency has its place, when it becomes rigid and absolute, it can trap you in isolation that masquerades as strength. This internal voice is often quite convincing. It uses language that sounds positive, empowering, strong. It tells you that you're capable, that you've handled difficult things before and can handle them now, that needing help would be a sign of weakness. It reminds you of times when you asked for support and were disappointed, using those memories as evidence that you're better off on your own. It frames independence as a virtue and dependence as a flaw, suggesting that truly strong people don't need anyone, that self-sufficiency is the highest form of maturity. But there's a subtle manipulation happening in this internal dialogue. It's conflating different things. There's a difference between being capable and having to do everything alone. There's a difference between being strong and never showing vulnerability. There's a difference between healthy independence and rigid self-reliance that refuses all support. But the voice doesn't make these distinctions. Instead, it creates a binary. Either you're strong and handle everything yourself, or you're weak and dependent. And faced with that choice, you choose what feels safer, what feels more aligned with how you see yourself. You choose to be strong, which means you choose to be alone. This voice also serves a protective function. It keeps you from having to risk vulnerability. Because asking for help, admitting you're struggling, letting someone see your pain, all of these require immense courage. They require you to risk rejection, to risk judgment, to risk the possibility that you'll reach out and the support you need won't be there. The voice that tells you that you can handle everything alone protects you from those risks. It keeps you in a familiar, if lonely place where you know what to expect, where you maintain control, where you don't have to depend on anyone else's capacity to show up for you. But the cost of this self-sufficiency is high. Maintaining constant composure requires enormous emotional energy. It's like holding a muscle tight all day long, every single day without rest. The strain is invisible to others, but it's deeply felt by the person doing it. This constant emotional regulation can lead to exhaustion that goes beyond physical tiredness. It's a deep weariness that comes from never letting yourself fully relax, from always monitoring yourself, from living in a state of perpetual self-control. And over time, this exhaustion can manifest in ways that seem unrelated. Difficulty sleeping, trouble concentrating, a sense of numbness or disconnection from your own feelings. The exhaustion of constant composure is cumulative. Each day that you hold yourself together, each interaction where you perform normalcy, each moment when you suppress what you're really feeling, it all adds up. And unlike physical exhaustion that can be resolved with rest, this emotional exhaustion persists. Because even when you're alone, even when you could theoretically let down your guard, The habit of composure is so strong that you often can't release it. You might lie in bed at night, body tired, mind exhausted, but still unable to relax because the muscle of self-control has been clenched for so long that you've forgotten how to let it soften. This exhaustion also affects your capacity to feel. When you're constantly regulating your emotions, constantly controlling what you allow yourself to experience, your emotional range starts to narrow. It's as if your system decides that the safest thing to do is to turn down the volume on all feelings, not just the painful ones. So you start to notice that joy feels muted, excitement feels distant. Even positive experiences don't land with the full impact they should. You're going through life in a state of emotional dampening, protected from the lows, but also cut off from the highs, existing in a kind of grey middle ground where nothing feels quite real, quite vivid, quite alive. The physical manifestations of this exhaustion are real and measurable. Your sleep becomes disrupted because your nervous system never truly settles. You might fall asleep easily because you're so tired, but you wake frequently, or you sleep restlessly, or you wake up still feeling drained. Your concentration suffers because a significant portion of your cognitive resources are always dedicated to emotional management, leaving less available for focus and attention. You might find yourself reading the same paragraph multiple times, losing track of conversations, forgetting things you normally wouldn't forget. And then there's the grief. There's a particular kind of grief that people who carry pain in silence know intimately. It's the grief that sits in your throat, the words and tears and screams that were never allowed to come out. It's the accumulated sorrow of every loss you processed alone, every disappointment you never spoke about, every heartbreak you moved through without support. This grief doesn't disappear just because it wasn't expressed. It lives in your body, in the tightness of your jaw, in the shallow quality of your breath, in the way certain songs or memories can suddenly make your chest feel like it's collapsing inward. This unexpressed grief has a weight to it, a presence that you carry everywhere even though you rarely acknowledge it directly. It's the grief of all the times you wanted to fall apart but didn't. The grief of all the moments when you needed comfort but couldn't ask for it. The grief of losses that you never properly mourned because you were too busy staying strong. The grief of relationships where you were never fully known because you couldn't let yourself be seen. The grief of a life lived partially, where so much of your inner experience remained hidden, unshared, unwitnessed. Sometimes this grief emerges in unexpected ways. A song comes on the radio, something you haven't heard in years, and suddenly you feel your throat tighten, your eyes sting with tears that you don't fully understand. Or you're watching a movie and a scene of tenderness, of someone being truly seen and held in their pain, breaks something open inside you. Or you're alone in your car, in the shower, in some private moment, and without warning you're crying, sobbing really, for reasons you can't quite articulate. This is the unexpressed grief finding its way out through whatever cracks it can find, seeking release even when you won't consciously allow it. The throat, in particular, becomes a holding place for this grief. Somatic therapists talk about how the throat is where we literally swallow our words, where we physically hold back expression. When you've spent years not saying what you feel, not crying when you need to cry, not screaming when you want to scream, your throat becomes tight, constricted, sometimes chronically sore or uncomfortable. You might clear your throat frequently. You might feel like something is stuck there. This is your body holding the grief you won't let out, storing it in the very place where expression would naturally occur. Something interesting happens when you carry pain in silence for long enough. It becomes part of your identity. You begin to think of yourself as the strong one, the one who doesn't need help, the one who can handle anything. This identity feels important, valuable, maybe even essential to who you are. But it also creates a trap, because if being strong means never showing pain, then showing pain threatens your entire sense of self. It feels like a fundamental failure rather than a normal human experience. And so the pattern continues, reinforcing itself, because letting go of the silence feels like losing yourself. This fusion between pain and identity happens gradually, imperceptibly. You don't wake up one day and decide that being the strong one will be your defining characteristic. Instead, it accumulates through countless interactions where you showed up as strong, where you handled things others couldn't handle, where you were the rock that others leaned on. And each time this happened, each time someone said, "You're so strong," or "I don't know how you do it," or "You always have it together," it reinforced this identity. It told you that this is who you are, this is your value, this is what makes you special and necessary in other people's lives. Over time, this identity becomes central to how you see yourself and how you navigate the world. When you think about who you are, the strong one, the capable one, the one who handles everything, these descriptors feel fundamental. They're not just behaviors, they're who you believe yourself to be at a core level. And this creates a profound investment in maintaining the identity. Because if you're not the strong one, then who are you? If you're not the person who can handle everything, then what's your value? If you show vulnerability, weakness, need, does that mean you've been pretending all along? Does it invalidate everything you thought you knew about yourself? This is the trap. Your identity becomes dependent on maintaining a certain presentation, on continuing to be the person who never breaks, never needs, never struggles visibly. And vulnerability, which should be a normal part of human experience, becomes a threat to your entire sense of self. It's not just that showing pain feels uncomfortable or risky. It feels like existential annihilation, like you would be destroying the very foundation of who you are. And faced with that level of threat, of course you continue the pattern. Of course you keep carrying everything in silence. Because the alternative feels like disappearing, like becoming someone you don't recognize, like losing the one thing you thought made you worthy of love and respect. What's particularly painful about this trap is that the identity was built as a protection, but it ends up becoming a prison. You created this strong, capable, self-sufficient identity because it kept you safe, because it gave you value, because it seemed to work. But now you're locked inside it, unable to show the full range of your humanity because doing so would contradict who you've become. And the irony is that true strength, the kind that comes from genuine wholeness rather than careful performance, would actually include the capacity to be vulnerable, to need others, to acknowledge pain without shame. But you can't access that kind of strength while you're trapped in an identity that defines strength as the absence of need. This invisible labour, this constant work of emotional management, is something that people who carry pain in silence perform constantly, and it's almost never acknowledged or recognised. It's the labour of emotional management, of making sure your feelings don't inconvenience others, of processing everything internally so that externally you remain pleasant, approachable, easy to be around. This labour is exhausting, but because it's invisible, it rarely receives validation. No one thanks you for not burdening them. No one acknowledges how hard you're working to make their experience of you comfortable, and this lack of acknowledgement can make you feel even more alone in your struggle. Think about all the work that goes into this emotional management. Before you interact with anyone, you assess your internal state and decide what's appropriate to express. You're feeling overwhelmed? You adjust yourself to appear calm. You're heartbroken? You put on a pleasant face. You're anxious. You project confidence. This assessment and adjustment happens so quickly, so automatically, that you might not even register it as work. But it is work, significant work, and you're doing it constantly throughout every day. During interactions, the labour continues. You're monitoring the emotional temperature of the room, adjusting your energy to match what's needed. If someone else is struggling, you become the supporter, putting aside your own needs to hold space for theirs. If the mood is light, you participate in that lightness, even if it feels dissonant with your internal state. If tension arises, you often become the mediator, the one who smooths things over, who makes everything comfortable again. All of this requires attunement, effort, constant calibration of your presentation to serve the needs of the moment and the people around you. After interactions, there's more work. You process what happened, you replay conversations, you think about whether you managed your emotions successfully, whether you showed too much or not enough. You discharge the emotions you held in during the interaction, sometimes crying alone after maintaining composure in public, sometimes feeling the anger or sadness or fear that you couldn't express in the moment. This processing happens in solitude, invisible to everyone else, part of the ongoing labour of carrying your pain privately. What makes this labour particularly exhausting is its relentlessness. There's no break, no time when you can stop managing your emotions, even in moments that should be restful, moments alone or in supposedly safe relationships. The habit of emotional management continues. You've been doing it for so long that you don't know how to stop. And because this work is invisible, because it leaves no tangible evidence, it's rarely recognized or valued. People see the end result, your calm demeanor, your pleasant presentation, your apparent ease. They don't see the enormous effort required to maintain that presentation. The lack of acknowledgement compounds the loneliness. You're working so hard, expending so much energy, carrying so much weight, and no one knows. No one says, "I appreciate how much you're managing internally," or "I see how hard you're working to stay composed," or "Thank you for processing your own pain so quietly." And you wouldn't expect them to say these things, because they can't see the work you're doing. But the absence of recognition still stings. It reinforces the feeling that your struggle doesn't matter, that the pain you carry is yours alone to handle, that no one would care even if they did know. Often, beneath the silence, there's shame. Shame about having pain in the first place. Shame about not being able to handle things as well as you think you should. Shame about needing help, about feeling weak, about struggling when it seems like everyone else is managing just fine. This shame is often irrational, but it's incredibly powerful. It convinces you that your pain is somehow evidence of your inadequacy, that admitting struggle means admitting failure. And shame thrives in silence. It grows stronger when it's hidden, when it's never exposed to the light of honest acknowledgement. Shame is perhaps the most insidious force in keeping pain silent. Unlike fear, which you can sometimes reason with, shame operates at a deeper level. It's not just that you're afraid of how others will respond to your pain. It's that you believe, at some fundamental level, that having pain makes you defective, inadequate, less than. The shame tells you that you shouldn't be struggling, that if you were strong enough, smart enough, capable enough, you would have figured this out by now. It tells you that your pain is evidence of your failure as a human being. This shame often has roots in early messages about emotional expression. Maybe you internalize the belief that strong people don't cry, that capable people don't need help, that successful people don't struggle. These beliefs might have come from explicit messages in childhood, or they might have been absorbed more subtly from cultural narratives about strength and weakness, success and failure, independence and dependence. Either way, they created a framework where having pain and needing support became sources of shame, rather than normal aspects of human experience. Shame also thrives on comparison. You look around and everyone else seems to be managing their lives successfully. They appear happy, capable, together. You don't see their private struggles, their moments of breakdown, their silent suffering, because they're hiding it just like you're hiding yours. But all you can see is the surface, and compared to their apparently effortless functioning, your struggle feels like personal failure. The shame tells you that something is wrong with you specifically, that you're uniquely inadequate, that everyone else has figured out how to do life correctly except you. What makes shame so powerful is that it creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Shame makes you hide your pain. Hiding your pain increases the shame, because now you're ashamed not only of having pain, but also of hiding it, of being dishonest, of not being authentic. The more you hide, the more shame accumulates. And the more shame you feel, the more impossible it becomes to break the silence. Because now you would have to admit not only to the pain, but to all the hiding, all the pretending, all the months or years of presenting a false front. This shame becomes a wall that grows taller the longer the silence continues. Researcher Brené Brown has written extensively about how shame loses its power when it's spoken, when it's brought into connection with others. But when you're carrying pain in silence, when shame is part of what keeps you silent, accessing that healing vulnerability feels impossible. You're caught in a paradox where the cure for your shame requires the very thing your shame prevents you from doing: speaking your truth, showing your struggle, allowing yourself to be seen in your imperfection. And yet, sometimes the hardest moments aren't the obviously painful ones. They're the moments of unexpected tenderness. When someone shows you gentleness you didn't know you needed. When someone sees past your mask and asks if you're okay with real concern. When someone offers help without making you feel weak for needing it. These moments can crack you open in ways that tragedy doesn't, because they remind you of what you've been missing. They remind you that there's another way to exist, one where you don't have to carry everything alone. And that reminder can be both beautiful and unbearably painful. There's something about genuine kindness that bypasses all your defenses. You can maintain your composure through difficulty, through stress, through obvious challenges. But when someone treats you with unexpected gentleness, when someone's care reaches you in a moment when you weren't braced for it, something inside you softens. And that softening is both a relief and a danger. It's a relief because you've been holding yourself so rigidly for so long that gentleness feels like permission to relax, even just slightly. But it's a danger because if you relax, if you let that softness spread, you might not be able to maintain the control you've worked so hard to keep. These moments often come from simple gestures. Someone makes you a cup of tea without you asking. Someone sends you a message checking in. Not the perfunctory, "How are you?" but something that shows they've been thinking about you specifically. Someone notices you seem tired and tells you it's okay to rest. Someone looks at you with such clear affection, such evident care, that for a moment you see yourself through their eyes and realize you've been treating yourself with a harshness that would break your heart if you saw someone else enduring it. What makes these moments so powerful is the contrast they create. You've been existing in a state where you don't expect tenderness, where you've learned to function without it, where you've told yourself you don't need it, and then someone offers it freely, without you having to ask, without you having to earn it, without any expectation that you'll reciprocate or perform or be anything other than exactly what you are in that moment. And suddenly you realize how hungry you've been for exactly this, how much you've been missing it, how much of your energy has gone into convincing yourself you didn't need what you desperately needed all along. The beauty and pain are intertwined. Beautiful because you're being seen, being cared for, being treated with the gentleness you've denied yourself. Painful because it highlights everything you've been living without, all the moments when you needed tenderness and didn't receive it or didn't allow yourself to receive it. Painful because it shows you how much easier life could be if you let people care for you, if you let yourself be vulnerable, if you allowed support to flow toward you instead of always pushing it away. And painful because you don't know how to accept this tenderness without breaking, without crying, without letting out everything you've been holding in. People who carry pain in silence often find themselves in similar patterns across different relationships. They become the listener, the supporter, the strong one that others lean on. They create relationships where their role is to be stable, reliable, unshakable. And while there's beauty in being supportive, when it becomes one-directional, when you never allow the support to flow back toward you, it creates an imbalance that can lead to deep loneliness. You end up in relationships where people know how to receive from you, but have never learned how to give back, because you've never shown them that you need anything. This pattern in relationships is so consistent that you might not even notice it anymore. Look at your friendships, your family relationships, your romantic partnerships. In how many of them are you primarily the giver, the supporter, the one who holds space for others? In how many do people call you when they're struggling, share their problems with you, lean on your strength? And in how many do you feel comfortable doing the same? In how many do you share your own struggles, your own needs, your own moments of weakness? Often, the imbalance is stark. You show up for others consistently, reliably, generously. You listen to their problems for hours. You offer support during their difficult times. You celebrate their victories. You hold them when they cry. But when it comes to your own pain, your own needs, your own struggles, you handle them alone. And it's not necessarily that people in your life wouldn't want to support you. It's that you've never given them the opportunity. You've trained them through years of behavior that you're the strong one who doesn't need anything in return. This creates relationships that feel unsatisfying in ways you might struggle to articulate. You care about these people. You value them. But there's a loneliness in the imbalance, a sense that you're not fully in relationship with them because they don't know the real you, the you that struggles and hurts and needs. They know the version of you that shows up for them, but they don't know the version that needs someone to show up in return. And this creates a particular kind of isolation, the isolation of being surrounded by relationships that feed only in one direction. If you carry pain in silence long enough, eventually something has to give. But the breaking point rarely looks like what you'd expect. It's usually not a dramatic collapse or obvious breakdown. Instead, it's often quiet. It might look like finally crying in your car after holding it together all day. It might look like cancelling plans because you just can't perform normalcy anymore. It might look like a moment of truth with someone you trust, where you finally let slip that things aren't as fine as they seem. These quiet breaking points are often the beginning of something important, the first crack in the armour that might eventually lead to freedom. The mythology around breaking points, shaped by movies and dramatic narratives, suggests that people hit rock bottom in obvious, visible ways. A complete breakdown, a public crisis, a moment so undeniable that everyone around you immediately understands the depth of what you've been carrying. But real breaking points, the ones that happen to people who've been carrying pain in silence for years, rarely look like that. They're quieter, more private, more subtle, and often they happen in moments that seem completely ordinary. Maybe you're driving home from work, the same route you take every day, and a song comes on the radio. Nothing particularly significant about the song, but something in it touches that place where you've been storing everything, and suddenly you're crying so hard you have to pull over. You sit in your parked car, tears streaming down your face, and you're not even entirely sure what you're crying about. It's not one thing, it's everything. It's the accumulation of all the pain you've been carrying, finally finding a small opening through which to escape. Or maybe you're getting ready for a social event, standing in front of your closet, and you realise you just can't do it. You can't put on the performance tonight. You can't show up and be pleasant and engaged and fine. The thought of it feels impossibly exhausting. And instead of pushing through like you normally would, instead of forcing yourself to go, you send a cancellation text. And then you sit with the guilt, the feeling that you're letting people down, the worry about what they'll think. But beneath the guilt, there's also a small sense of relief. Relief that for tonight at least, you don't have to perform. Or maybe the breaking point comes in conversation with someone you trust. You're talking about something relatively minor, and they ask a simple question. Are you okay? And instead of your automatic, I'm fine, something different happens. Maybe you pause a beat too long. Maybe your voice wavers slightly. Maybe you say, I don't know, instead of your usual reassurance. And that tiny crack in your composure, that small deviation from your normal pattern, that's the breaking point. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment, but it represents a significant shift. You've allowed even a sliver of truth to emerge. These quiet breaking points are often accompanied by a complex mix of emotions. There's relief, the sense of finally releasing even a small portion of what you've been holding. There's fear, worry about what this means, whether you can maintain control, whether you've revealed too much. There's shame, the old familiar shame about not being able to hold it together perfectly. And there's something else, something that might be too small to name in the moment but that matters enormously. It's a tiny seed of possibility, the possibility that things could be different, that you don't have to carry everything alone forever, that the armor you've built, as protective as it's been, might not have to be permanent. What makes these breaking points important is not the drama of them, but what they represent. They represent the moment when the cost of silence finally exceeds the fear of speaking. when holding everything in finally becomes more painful than the risk of letting something out, when the weight of carrying everything alone finally becomes too heavy to bear without at least a momentary rest. And while these moments might feel like failure, like you've lost control or shown weakness, they're actually the opposite. They're the first small step towards something healthier, something more sustainable, something more human. From this place, learning to share pain after years of silence is one of the hardest things a person can do. It requires rewiring beliefs that have been reinforced for decades. It means risking vulnerability with no guarantee of how it will be received. It means accepting that you might be uncomfortable, that others might be uncomfortable, that things might feel messy and uncertain. But it also opens the possibility of real connection, of being known and loved for who you actually are, not just the version you've carefully presented. And that possibility, as terrifying as it is also profoundly hopeful. The journey toward letting others in doesn't happen all at once. You don't go from carrying everything in silence to suddenly being openly vulnerable about all your struggles. Instead, it happens gradually, through small steps that feel enormous when you're taking them. Maybe you start by sharing something relatively minor with someone safe, not your deepest pain, not your most carefully guarded secret, but something real, something that requires letting someone see you're not entirely fine. And you watch how they respond. Do they listen with care? Do they offer comfort without judgment? Do they stay present with you, or do they pull away? These early experiments with vulnerability are terrifying because everything feels at stake. You've spent so long believing that showing pain will result in rejection, that needing support will make you a burden, that revealing struggle will change how people see you. And now you're testing those beliefs, putting them up against reality to see if they're actually true. And sometimes, painfully, you discover that some of those fears are warranted. Sometimes you do share something real, and the response is disappointing. Someone minimizes your pain or tries to fix it when you just needed to be heard, or becomes uncomfortable and changes the subject. These experiences hurt, and they can make you want to retreat back into silence, back into the familiar safety of carrying everything alone. But sometimes the response is different. Sometimes you share something real, and the person receives it with care. They don't try to fix you or minimize your pain or make it about them. They simply listen. They offer comfort. They let you know that what you shared doesn't change how they see you, doesn't make you a burden, doesn't make you less in their eyes. And these experiences, as small as they might seem, are revolutionary. They begin to chip away at the beliefs that have kept you silent. They provide evidence that vulnerability doesn't always lead to rejection, that needing support doesn't make you unlovable, that showing struggle doesn't destroy relationships. Over time, as you accumulate these positive experiences, as you learn through practice that some people can hold your pain with care, the beliefs begin to shift. Not completely, not permanently, not without setbacks, but shift nonetheless. You start to realize that the catastrophic outcomes you feared don't always materialize, that people are often more capable of supporting you than you gave them credit for. That real connection requires real vulnerability, and that the relationships that can hold your truth are the ones worth keeping. The journey also requires something perhaps even harder than learning to be vulnerable with others. It requires learning to be compassionate with yourself. People who carry pain in silence are often incredibly compassionate toward others, but remarkably harsh with themselves. They can hold space for other people's struggles with endless patience, but judge their own struggles as weakness or failure. Learning self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness you naturally extend to others. It means recognizing that pain is part of being human, not evidence of being inadequate. It means understanding that you deserve support, care, and gentleness, especially from yourself. This shift in self-relationship is often the most transformative aspect of healing. Think about how you respond when someone you care about is struggling. When a friend comes to you in pain, do you judge them? Do you tell them they're weak or inadequate? Do you suggest their struggle is evidence of failure? Of course not. You offer kindness. You listen with patience. You hold space for their feelings without trying to fix them immediately. You remind them that struggle is part of being human, that they're doing their best, that they deserve support and care. You extend to them a gentleness that feels natural, obvious, right. Now think about how you respond to yourself when you're struggling. The internal dialogue is likely very different. You might be critical, harsh, impatient. You might tell yourself you should be handling things better, that other people manage similar situations without falling apart, that your struggle is evidence of your inadequacy. You might push yourself to keep going even when you're exhausted, might deny yourself rest or comfort or support because you believe you don't deserve those things, at least not until you've proven you're strong enough to not need them. This double standard is almost universal among people who carry pain in silence. They have endless compassion for others and almost none for themselves. And this lack of self-compassion is both a cause and a consequence of silent suffering. It's a cause because if you judge yourself harshly for having pain, of course you'll hide that pain from others. It's a consequence because carrying pain in silence requires constant self-criticism, constant vigilance against showing weakness, constant judgment of your own humanity. Learning self-compassion means recognizing this double standard and actively working to change it. It means noticing when your internal dialogue is harsh and intentionally softening it. When you catch yourself thinking, "I should be able to handle this," you practice saying instead, "This is hard and it's okay that I'm struggling." When you notice yourself comparing your struggles to others and finding yourself lacking, you practice reminding yourself that everyone's experience is different, that struggle isn't a competition, that your pain is valid regardless of how it compares to anyone else's. This practice feels awkward at first, almost false. You've been treating yourself with harshness for so long that gentleness feels unnatural, undeserved. But researcher Kristin Neff, who has spent decades studying self-compassion, has shown that self-compassion is a skill that can be learned, practiced, strengthened over time. And the research shows that people who develop self-compassion experience less anxiety and depression, greater emotional resilience, and healthier relationships. Self-compassion isn't self-indulgence or weakness. It's a foundation for genuine well-being. Part of self-compassion is recognizing that your pain doesn't need to be earned or justified. You don't need to prove your struggle is bad enough to deserve your own kindness. Pain is part of human experience, and you deserve gentleness in your pain simply because you're human, simply because you're suffering, simply because suffering calls for compassion. This might be the hardest thing to believe, especially if you've spent your life measuring your pain against others, minimizing your own struggles, telling yourself that you don't have a right to be struggling when others have it worse. But your pain is real, valid, deserving of care, regardless of how it compares to anyone else's experience. And through this journey of learning vulnerability and self-compassion, something begins to shift in how you relate to your pain. Healing doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means learning to integrate it, to acknowledge it as part of your story without letting it define your entire identity. It means finding ways to honor what you've survived, while also allowing yourself to move forward. Integration means you can hold both truths at once. You can be someone who has known deep pain and someone who is also capable of joy. You can be someone who has struggled privately and someone who is learning to connect openly. You become more whole not by eliminating the painful parts, but by bringing them into relationship with all the other parts of who you are. Integration is different from resolution. Resolution suggests that the pain is solved, finished, complete. But pain, especially the deep pain that comes from years of silent suffering, doesn't resolve neatly. It remains part of your story, part of your experience, part of what has shaped you. Integration acknowledges this reality. It doesn't try to erase the pain or pretend it didn't happen. Instead, it makes space for the pain as one part of a larger whole. Think of integration like creating a mosaic. Each piece of your experience, the painful parts and the joyful parts, the struggles and the strengths, the times you felt broken and the times you felt whole, each piece is a tile in the mosaic of who you are. For years, you might have tried to hide certain tiles, to keep the painful ones out of view, to present only the tiles that looked beautiful and acceptable. But a mosaic made of only beautiful tiles is incomplete, is partial, doesn't tell the full story of who you are. Integration means bringing all the tiles into the picture, including the painful ones, and seeing how they create a complete image, complex and real and wholly yours. When you integrate your pain rather than hide it, you stop having to divide yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You stop having to perform one version of yourself while concealing another. You can begin to show up more wholly, more authentically, bringing all of who you are into your relationships and your life. And paradoxically, this makes you more capable of joy, not less. Because you're no longer using so much energy to keep parts of yourself hidden. You're no longer living in fear that someone will discover your secret struggles. You can be present more fully because you're no longer so divided. Integration also allows you to honor what you've survived. The years of carrying pain in silence weren't wasted or wrong. They were survival. They were how you coped with situations that felt overwhelming, how you protected yourself when you didn't know another way, how you continued moving forward when everything inside you wanted to stop. There's no shame in that survival. There's only acknowledgement. You did what you needed to do to get through. And now, perhaps you're learning different ways to navigate pain, ways that involve connection rather than isolation, ways that involve self-compassion rather than self-judgment, ways that honor both your strength and your humanity. Perhaps the most important thing to understand is this. Carrying pain in silence takes extraordinary courage, even if it doesn't feel courageous. It takes strength to wake up each day and face a world that doesn't see what you're holding. It takes resilience to keep moving forward when everything inside you feels heavy. You've been practicing a kind of survival that deserves recognition, even if no one has acknowledged it. And now, as you perhaps begin to consider a different way, as you think about what it might mean to let some of that pain be shared, that same courage is still there. It hasn't disappeared. It's just being redirected. from silent endurance toward vulnerable honesty, from isolated strength toward connected wholeness. You've been so brave, braver than you probably realize, brave in ways that don't get celebrated or recognized because they happen quietly, privately, in the invisible space of your inner world. Every day that you've carried pain while still showing up for life, that's been an act of courage. Every moment that you've held yourself together when you wanted to fall apart, that's been an act of strength. Every time you've moved forward despite the weight you're carrying, that's been an act of resilience. None of this has been easy. None of this has been simple, and yet you've done it, day after day, year after year. And the courage it took to survive in silence is the same courage that will help you learn to speak. The strength it took to endure alone is the same strength that will help you reach out for connection. The resilience that kept you moving forward is the same resilience that will help you through the vulnerable, uncertain process of letting others in. You haven't lost anything by considering a different way. You're simply learning to direct your courage toward connection instead of concealment, toward openness instead of protection, toward wholeness instead of division. This doesn't mean the journey will be easy. Learning to share pain after years of silence is challenging, uncomfortable, sometimes scary. There will be moments when you want to retreat back into the familiar safety of carrying everything alone. There will be times when vulnerability feels like too much, when you'll doubt whether it's worth the risk. But your courage, that quiet courage that has been with you all along, that same courage will help you through those moments. It will help you take one more small step toward openness, one more risk toward connection, one more moment of allowing yourself to be seen. You're not broken for having carried your pain in silence. You're human. You did what you needed to do to survive in circumstances that felt overwhelming. And now perhaps you're ready for something different. Not because the old way was wrong, but because you're ready to stop carrying everything alone. Because you're ready to discover that you don't have to be perfect to be loved. Because you're ready to learn that vulnerability isn't weakness, but a form of strength. Because you're ready to experience the relief, the connection, the wholeness that comes when you finally allow yourself to be fully seen, fully human, fully you. And so you've traveled through this landscape tonight, through the quiet territory of your own pain, your own silence, your own extraordinary capacity to endure. You've looked at the ways you learned to carry everything alone, and you've begun to see that silence not as weakness, but as survival, not as failure, but as the only way you knew how to protect yourself in a world that didn't always feel safe enough to hold you. You've walked through the architecture of your own concealment, through the weight you've accumulated, through the loneliness that lives even within connection. You've explored the mask you wear, the performance you maintain, the exhaustion that comes from constant composure. You've witnessed the grief that sits in your throat, the shame that keeps you silent, the fear of being too much. You've seen the patterns in your relationships, the breaking points that arrive quietly, the courage it takes simply to survive. And if nothing else changes tonight, if nothing shifts immediately, you can know this. You've been seen. Your struggle has been witnessed. Your pain, the pain you've carried so quietly for so long, matters deeply. Every single moment you've spent holding yourself together deserves acknowledgement. Every morning you woke up and chose to face another day, even when the weight of everything you were carrying felt unbearable, even when staying in bed felt like the only thing you could manage, but you got up anyway. every conversation where you smiled and nodded and participated, while carrying an ocean of unexpressed emotion inside, while managing feelings that threatened to overwhelm you, while maintaining composure that required every ounce of energy you had. Every night you lay in bed, body exhausted, mind racing, replaying the day's performance, wondering if anyone would ever truly understand what it costs you to appear so fine, to seem so together, to look so capable when inside you feel like you're barely holding on. All of it matters, all of it counts, all of it is part of your story, and your story is important, valuable, worthy of being known and honoured and held with tenderness. You've been so careful with yourself, perhaps too careful. You've protected others from your pain with such dedication, such commitment, such unwavering consistency that you forgot to protect yourself from the loneliness of that protection. You've been so skilled at appearing fine, at performing wellness, at maintaining the facade of someone who has everything under control that you've sometimes lost touch with what it feels like to actually be fine, to exist without the constant monitoring, without the perpetual performance, without the weight of everything you're not saying pressing against your chest like a stone that grows heavier with each passing day. And perhaps tonight, as you've listened to this exploration of silent suffering, as these words have washed over you in the darkness, you've recognized yourself in these descriptions. Perhaps you felt the relief of being understood, even if just for a moment, even if just through a recording that speaks into the quiet of your room. Perhaps you felt less alone knowing that this pattern you've lived with for so long, this quiet carry-in of pain, this careful concealment of struggle, is something others understand, something others have experienced, something that doesn't make you strange or broken or fundamentally flawed. Perhaps you've realized that you're part of a quiet community of people who carry their pain with such dignity, such grace, such silent strength that the world never sees what they're holding. Because you're not broken. This is important enough to say again, to let it settle into you more deeply, to allow it to sink beneath the layers of self-judgment and shame and fear that you've accumulated over the years. You are not broken. You are not too much or too little. You are not inadequate because you've struggled, or weak because you've hurt, or failing because you've needed support you couldn't ask for. You are human, beautifully and completely human, worthy exactly as you are in this very moment. Your pain doesn't diminish you. Your silence doesn't define you. Your struggle doesn't make you less than anyone else. You are whole, even in your brokenness. You are enough, even in your incompleteness. You're deserving of love, of care, of gentleness, of support, of understanding, especially from yourself. The gentleness you extend to others so naturally, that same gentleness belongs to you too. It's not something you need to earn or prove you deserve. It's yours by birthright, by virtue of being human, by the simple fact that you exist and you're struggling, and struggling calls for compassion. The patience you offer when someone else is having a hard time, when they're moving slowly or making mistakes or not performing at their best, you deserve that same patience. The understanding you provide when someone shares their difficulties with you, when they reveal their vulnerabilities, when they admit they're not okay, you are worthy of that same understanding. The compassion that flows from you so easily toward others, like water from a spring, natural and abundant, it should flow toward you as well. It belongs to you. You don't have to hoard it all for others. There's enough for you too. Think about what it might feel like to treat yourself the way you treat people you love. What if you spoke to yourself with the kindness you naturally extend to a struggling friend? What if, when you made a mistake or felt overwhelmed or couldn't handle something as well as you thought you should, instead of harsh self-criticism, you offered yourself understanding? What if you allowed yourself the same grace you offer to others when they're not at their best, when they're having a hard day, when they need extra support? What if you believed, truly believed, that your needs matter just as much as everyone else's needs? Not more than theirs, but not less than either. Just as much. Equal, valid, important, worthy of attention and care and response. This doesn't mean you have to change everything immediately. You don't have to suddenly start sharing all your pain with everyone you know. You don't have to dismantle the protective patterns you've built overnight, tearing down walls that took years to construct. You don't have to become a completely different person by morning. Change, real, lasting, meaningful change happens slowly, gently, in small increments, in tiny steps that accumulate over time like drops of water that eventually fill a vessel. Maybe you start by simply noticing when you're performing instead of being present, when you're managing your image instead of experiencing your moment. Maybe you start by allowing yourself to feel your feelings privately, even just for a few seconds, before immediately suppressing them or redirecting your attention or numbing yourself out. Maybe you start by saying, "I'm struggling," to just one safe person, instead of your automatic "I'm fine." Testing the waters of vulnerability in the smallest possible way. Maybe you start by writing down what you're feeling in a journal that no one else will ever see, giving your pain expression even if no one else ever witnesses it, allowing yourself to acknowledge your own experience in the privacy of your own pages. Or maybe you don't change anything at all right now. Maybe you're not ready for any of that, and that's okay too. There's no timeline for healing. There's no deadline by which you must become vulnerable, or open, or different than you are right now. There's no cosmic schedule that says you should have figured this out by a certain age, or after a certain number of years, or once certain conditions are met. You've survived this long by carrying your pains silently. That survival strategy, as costly as it's been, as exhausting as it's been, as lonely as it's been, has kept you alive, kept you functioning, kept you moving through a world that often felt overwhelming and unsafe and too much to handle any other way. There's no shame in that survival. There's only recognition that survival, while necessary and valuable and worthy of respect, isn't the same as thriving. And perhaps someday, when you're ready, when it feels safer, when the conditions align, when something inside you says now, you'll begin to explore what it might mean to move from surviving to thriving, from enduring to living, from carrying everything alone to allowing yourself to be supported and held and known. The path toward that possibility is there whenever you're ready to take it. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't expire, it doesn't have a time limit or a deadline or an expiration date. It waits patiently for you, just as you've been waiting patiently for the world to become safe enough to be vulnerable in, for people to prove themselves trustworthy enough to hold your truth, for circumstances to align in a way that makes openness feel possible instead of terrifying. And maybe that safety will never feel complete. Maybe there will always be some risk in opening up, in sharing pain, in letting people see your struggles and your fears and your imperfections. But maybe at some point the risk will start to feel worth it. Maybe the loneliness of silence will eventually outweigh the fear of speaking. Maybe the weight of carrying everything alone day after day after day will become heavier than the vulnerability of letting someone help you carry it, of sharing the load, of allowing support to flow toward you, instead of always away from you toward others. And when that time comes, if it comes, you'll have all the courage you need, because the courage isn't something you have to develop from scratch, or build from nothing, or create out of thin air. It's something you've been practicing all along every single day, in ways you probably haven't recognized or acknowledged or given yourself credit for. Every day you've carried pain silently has been an exercise in courage. Every moment you've held yourself together when you wanted to fall apart has been strength in action. Every time you've moved forward despite everything you're feeling, despite the weight on your chest and the tightness in your throat and the exhaustion in your bones, has been an act of remarkable resilience. That courage, that strength, that resilience, it's all still there inside you. It hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't diminished or disappeared or been used up. It's just been directed toward endurance rather than vulnerability, toward surviving rather than connecting, toward protecting rather than revealing. But it can be redirected. The same qualities that have helped you survive in silence can help you learn to speak, to reach out, to connect, to allow yourself to be known and seen and supported. You don't have to figure out how right now, in this moment, as you lie here in the darkness. You don't have to have a detailed plan or know all the steps or understand the entire process or see the whole journey laid out before you. You just have to know that it's possible, that people do learn to share their pain after years, even decades, of silence, that relationships can become more balanced, more reciprocal, more mutual, more real and authentic and satisfying, that the performance of being fine can gradually, slowly, gently give way to the authenticity of being human, of being real, of being yourself in all your complexity. That the weight you're carrying can become lighter, not because the pain magically disappears or the struggles evaporate or life suddenly becomes easy, but because you're no longer carrying it entirely alone, because the burden is shared, because other hands help hold what feels too heavy for yours alone. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to believe that you deserve this, that you deserve relationships where you can be fully yourself, where you don't have to edit or perform or manage how you appear, that you deserve support and care and tenderness and comfort when you're struggling, that you deserve to have your pain acknowledged, your struggles witnessed, your humanity honored and held with gentleness, not because you've earned it through some achievement or accomplishment, not because you've proven yourself worthy through some test or trial, not because you've suffered enough or been strong enough or handled enough on your own, but simply because you exist, simply because you're here, in this body, in this life, having this human experience, simply because every human being without exception deserves to be known and loved and accepted for who they truly are, in all their complexity and all their imperfection, in all their beautiful, struggling, striving, hurting, hoping humanity. The world needs your authenticity more than it needs your performance. The people who truly care about you, the ones who matter, the ones whose opinions and presence actually count, they want to know the real you, not just the carefully curated version you think they can handle, or will accept, or won't be burdened by. They want the opportunity to show up for you the way you've shown up for them countless times. They want to support you, to care for you, to be there for you in your struggles the same way you've been there for them in theirs. But they can't do that if you never let them see that you're struggling. They can't offer comfort if they don't know you're hurting. They can't provide support if you never show them you need it, if you never give them the chance to reciprocate all the care and attention and energy you've poured into them. And yes, it's true that not everyone will respond well. Some people might disappoint you. Some people might not know how to hold your pain with the care it deserves. Some relationships might not be able to bear the weight of your full truth. But that doesn't mean you should continue hiding from everyone forever. It means you learn to discern who is safe and who isn't. It means you practice vulnerability with people who have earned your trust through their actions, through their consistency, through their demonstrated capacity to show up, not with everyone indiscriminately or all at once or without wisdom. It means you build a support system gradually, carefully, intentionally, with people who have shown through their behavior, not just their words, that they can be present with pain, that they can offer care without judgment or agenda, that they can hold space for your humanity without needing you to be perfect or put together or anything other than exactly what you are. These people exist. They're out there in the world. They might already be in your life, sitting quietly on the periphery, waiting for you to let them in, hoping you'll trust them enough to show them something real. Or you might need to find them, to seek out relationships and communities and connections that can hold more of your truth, that can handle more of your reality, that can embrace your full humanity. But they're out there. People who understand that strength includes vulnerability, not excludes it. People who know that needing help is part of being human, not a sign of weakness or failure. People who can witness your pain without trying to fix it immediately or minimize it, or dismiss it or make it about themselves or their own experiences. People who can simply be present with you in your struggle, offering the profound comfort of their presence, their acceptance, their steady care that doesn't waver when things get difficult. You deserve these relationships. You deserve this kind of connection. You deserve to be known, fully known, completely known, and loved anyway, accepted anyway, valued anyway. Not despite your struggles, but including them as part of the full picture of who you are. Not in spite of your pain, but with full awareness of it, with acknowledgement of it, with compassion for it. Not because you've hidden your imperfections skillfully enough to fool people into thinking you're perfect, but because you've allowed them to be seen, brought into the light, revealed in their fullness, and they've been met with compassion rather than judgment, with acceptance rather than rejection, with love rather than criticism. This is what real intimacy looks like. Not the carefully curated version of yourself that you present to the world, polished and perfected and protected, but the whole messy reality of who you are, the parts that are strong and the parts that are fragile, the moments when you're capable and the moments when you need help, the times when you're certain and confident and the times when you're lost and confused and don't know what to do, the experiences of joy and the experiences of pain, the victories and the failures, the light and the shadow, all of it, all of you, known and accepted and valued and loved, not in pieces but as a whole, not selectively but completely. And as you rest here tonight, as you let these words wash over you like gentle waves, as you feel the weight of your own experience settling around you like a familiar blanket, you can begin to imagine what this might feel like. You can let yourself wonder, just for a moment, what it might be like to share your pain with someone safe, and have them receive it with kindness, with care, with the tenderness it deserves. What it might be like to say those 3 difficult words, "I'm not okay," and have someone respond not with solutions or judgments or dismissive reassurances, but with presence and care and the willingness to simply sit with you in your struggle. What it might be like to let yourself cry in front of another person, to let the tears fall without immediately apologizing or explaining or trying to stop them, and discover that it doesn't destroy the relationship, doesn't make them think less of you, doesn't confirm your worst fears about being too much or too burdensome or too difficult to love. You can imagine it, even if you can't quite believe it yet. You can hold the possibility of it, even if it feels distant, unlikely, almost impossible from where you're sitting right now. Because possibility is where change begins. Not with certainty, not with a detailed roadmap, not with complete confidence or absolute assurance, but with the smallest whisper of maybe. Maybe things could be different. Maybe I don't have to carry everything alone forever. Maybe I deserve support and care and connection. Maybe vulnerability isn't as catastrophic as I've feared for all these years. Maybe opening up won't destroy me or push everyone away or confirm all my worst beliefs about myself. Maybe. And those maybes are enough for tonight. You don't need to have it all figured out right now. You don't need to make any decisions or take any action or commit to any specific changes or know exactly what comes next. You've done enough just by being here, just by listening to these words, just by allowing yourself to consider these ideas, to sit with these possibilities, to recognize yourself in this exploration of silent suffering. You've done enough by surviving as long as you have while carrying what you've been carrying. You've done enough by showing up for your life day after day after day, even when it felt impossibly hard, even when you didn't know how you'd make it through, even when everything inside you wanted to give up but you kept going anyway. You've done enough. You are enough. You have always been enough. So tonight, right now, in this moment, you can let all of this settle softly, like snow falling on quiet ground, like dust motes drifting through still air, like leaves floating gently to earth. You can release the effort of holding everything together. You can stop carrying just for now, just for tonight, just for these next hours of darkness and rest. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to fix anything or solve anything or improve anything. You don't have to be strong or capable or put together or fine. You can simply be here, breathing, resting, existing, allowing yourself to soften into this moment without any agenda or expectation or demand. Let your body sink into whatever is holding you. Feel the weight of your body being supported by the bed beneath you, by the mattress that holds you, by the pillow under your head, by gravity itself holding you close to the earth, keeping you grounded, keeping you safe. You don't have to hold yourself up. You don't have to maintain any particular position or posture or presentation. You can let go. You can allow yourself to be held, to be supported, to rest completely and fully, to surrender to the support that's already there beneath you. Let your breath deepen naturally, without force, without effort, without trying to control or manage or direct it. Don't make it happen, just notice it. The air moving in and out of your body, filling your lungs, nourishing your cells, sustaining your life, happening all on its own without any conscious effort from you. You don't have to manage your breathing. You don't have to do it right or make it perfect or even think about it. It knows what to do. Your body knows how to breathe, how to rest, how to heal, how to restore itself. You can trust it. You can let it do what it does naturally, what it's been doing your entire life, what it will continue to do without any help from your conscious mind. Let your mind slow, quieting like a pond settling after rain, like a snow globe coming to rest, like storm clouds dispersing to reveal clear sky. All the thoughts that have been churning and spinning and racing, all the worries and plans and replays of conversations and concerns about tomorrow and regrets about yesterday. Let them begin to settle. They'll still be there in the morning if you need them. They're not going anywhere. But for now, for tonight, for these precious hours of rest and restoration, you can let them drift away. Let them become background noise. Let them fade into the soft darkness of sleep, into the quiet space of not thinking, into the peace of simply being without analysing or planning or worrying. You're safe here, truly safe, in this moment, in this space, in this quiet. Darkness, you don't have to perform or pretend or protect anyone from yourself or manage how you appear or monitor your presentation. You can just be. Just breathe. Just exist exactly as you are, with all your pain and all your weariness and all your accumulated weight and all your unspoken struggles and all your hidden tears. You can bring all of it here, every bit of it, and let it rest with you. Let it be here without having to do anything about it, without having to solve it or fix it or make it better. You're held. Not just physically by the bed and the blankets and the pillow, but held in a larger sense, in a deeper sense. Held by the recognition that you're not alone in this experience, that others have walked this path, that your struggle is shared by countless others who also carry their pain silently. Held by the understanding that your struggle is valid and real and worthy of compassion, that it matters, that you matter. Held by the possibility that things can be different, that you can learn to carry your pain differently, that you don't have to do this alone forever, that connection and support and understanding are available to you when you're ready. You can rest now. You can let yourself drift, floating gently into sleep, knowing that you've done enough, carried enough, survived enough for one day, for one lifetime. Tonight, you can simply be. No performance required, no strength demanded, no composure necessary, no mask needed, just you, exactly as you are, tired and hurting and human and worthy of rest, worthy of peace, worthy of gentleness. Let yourself soften. Let your jaw unclench, releasing tension you might not have even known you were holding. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, falling heavy and relaxed. Let your belly relax, soft and unguarded. Let every muscle in your body release the tension it's been holding, some of it for hours, some for days, some for years, some for so long you've forgotten it was even there. You've forgotten what it feels like to be truly relaxed. You can let it go now. You can soften. You can melt into rest, into sleep, into peace. Let yourself sleep. Deep, restful, healing sleep. The kind of sleep that comes when you finally stop fighting, stop holding, stop performing, stop managing. The kind of sleep that restores and renews and repairs. The kind of sleep your body and mind and heart have been craving for so long. The rest you've needed. The peace you deserve. You're exactly where you need to be. In this moment, in this bed, in this quiet space, in this darkness, you are exactly where you belong, and you can rest here, fully and completely and without reservation, knowing that you are enough, you have always been enough, you will always be enough, exactly as you are. Sleep now, Let yourself drift into the soft darkness, into the gentle quiet, into the peace of simply being, of simply resting, of simply letting go. You're safe, you're held, you're worthy of rest, you're deserving of peace, sleep. There's a particular kind of ache that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with tears that fall in public places or words that spill out when you're overwhelmed. Instead, it lives quietly in the center of your chest, in the space between your ribs, in that soft hollow just below your throat. You carry it with you through ordinary days, through conversations where you smile and nod, through moments when someone asks how you're doing, and you hear yourself say, "I'm fine," even though those two words feel like they're covering something vast and unmapped. You've felt this, haven't you? This quiet weight that you've learned to hold so carefully that most people never notice it's there at all. And perhaps you've become so skilled at carrying it that even you sometimes forget it's there until a certain song plays, or someone says something unexpectedly kind, or you find yourself alone at the end of a long day, and suddenly the weight returns, familiar and heavy, reminding you that it never really left. If you've ever lived this way, if you've ever held your pain so privately that it felt like a secret even from yourself, you're not alone in this experience. And tonight, we're going to explore this together, gently and without judgment, because there is so much to understand about the quiet art of carrying pain in silence, and what it means for the person who has learned to do it so well.